Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today, well, it's always an inside day. Whether I say it is, whether I'm out and about, it is always an inside day. I always make that time to make a little bit of movement, to sort a little bit of my misunderstandings, right? Because we all grow up with perspectives of other people. We don't grow up with minds of our own, even though we would like to think so. So, for myself, in waking up to some of these ideas, the most important thing for me was to delve in and get a true perspective for myself. But today was an inside and an outside day. I went for a nice long walk. All I had was a hoodie and a vest on today. I thought it was going to be beautiful and warm, and it was actually quite windy and chilly today. And but it was still a really wonderful experience being outside today. I have to take my own advice, right? I have always had an amazing, I think, amazing connection to, I call it Mother Nature. Lots of people just call it the outdoors, nature, right? Being out in the fresh air. But I've always called it Mother Nature. Maybe it was going back to the 60s and 70s where there was that saying. I don't know. Hello, Tammy. I don't know if it was a popular saying in the States. But we would always say, you can't fool Mother Nature, right? You can't fool Mother Nature. And it was something that, when somebody was telling a fib or a lie, we were talking a little bit yesterday about fibs and lies and little white lies, right? We didn't talk about avoiding the conversation. That's a big one because lots of people, they like to think that they don't lie, right? They won't vocally, when somebody asks a question or is looking for the truth and they're searching out and asking those questions to get reflected back what the truth is, lots of times just people will change the subject, right? They'll just give a little smile or look up to the sky, right? And they're just avoiding telling the truth. For myself, I find that most infuriating only for the fact that I catch those signals. I always have because I'm looking for answers. I'm always looking for answers. Even as a teenager and as a young adult, not woke up to any of these ideas, right? I was always looking for the answers. I didn't know that it was called hypervigilance. But that's what it is, right? Just really paying attention. And it's a safety feature that comes from trauma, right? For myself, I come from a very dynamic family. I call it dynamic family because, you know, it was my family, and there's always going to be that sense of loyalty there. You never deny your own because in the end, that's all you've got, right? And this is the way that I feel. I believe that we're coming back with these same characters, lifetime after lifetime, and waking up to some of these ideas. It's just not the idea of connecting with Mother Nature, but it's actually connecting with ourselves, right? Connecting with ourselves, understanding ourselves, understanding those dynamic relationships that we are in, asking those whys and what ifs, and is this true, right? Is this true for me? Because the majority could think it's true, right? It's just like in the 15th century, they thought the world was flat. Everybody thought the world was flat, except for a couple adventurers out there who were adamant that the world was round. But everybody thought the world was flat, and it had to be proven. They had to see it with their own eyes. And I believe in that. I'm a realist. I want the proof, right? I want to see the evidence. But a lot of times, and I guess Tammy could relate to this a little bit in your faith in Jesus. It's not like you're sitting there and you're talking and seeing Jesus, that, you guys are best buddies and that he's interacting you in a physical way every single day. Now, there are miracles and there are visions and there are experiences in that. But on the norm, it's faith. We have to run on faith and we have to have belief and trust, right? And that's a big one, is trust, because in our experiences and being realists quite often, right, our trust is broken. We see things sometimes after decades and decades to come to a realization that someone or something is not what you thought it was, right? So, again, and waking up to some of these ideas, it's searching out the truth. It's searching out what's for me and not concerning myself so much in whether or not the world is flat, what the majority thinks. It's like, what do I think? What do I trust? What do I believe? And I have to dig, just like an investigator. This is what I'm doing. I do not want to be a conspiracy. I don't want the what ifs or the maybes, right? I want to see the proof. I want to see the evidence, right? And especially when I'm here, right? I have a platform where we're having conversations Monday to Friday and Sunday with another live show that I do. And I don't want to misrepresent myself, but most definitely I do not want to misrepresent an untruth as a truth, right? And there is so much of that going on in the world. Not everybody can be right. Not everybody can be right. And it's to each one of us to decide for ourselves. We can't decide for anybody else, right? Because there is that influence, there are our religious faiths, there are community understandings, right? They're the people that we vote into the office and we trust that they're going to do a good job. And that's not always the case. And it's so painful. Like, there's nothing more painful than putting all your faith and trust into something or someone and have it demolished, have it implode, have it explode, have it shatter to a gazillion little pieces right in front of us. And it can make us feel like we can't trust or believe in anything. One of the examples I'm going to put forward in that, is when my marriage fell apart, right? When my marriage fell apart, like it wasn't even a brain fart. It never come across my mind in any way in those 9 years that we were together that it was a possibility that we were ever going to separate, let alone divorce, right? And I took it as anybody would take it when facing something like that, where you had everything invested in it, all your loyalty, all your trust, all your love, and then in one instant have it squashed, have it totally wiped out. And that could make us cold, right? That could make us not want to try, not want to try again. Uh, for myself, I found that relationships have always been difficult for me, only in the way that my emotions and my attentiveness was so wrapped up in that person that I was having that relationship with, whether that was my husband, my sisters, my father, my mother, right? Sometimes, it's our close friends, sometimes it's our coworkers, sometimes it's our customers, sometimes it's in that leadership that's out there, right? That we vote into office or we invest in because we believe and we trust what they're saying, right? But it's important not to take everything at face value. And there's nothing wrong with feeling out a truth, in researching a truth, right? Especially when it concerns your own peace of mind, your own little bit of trust in yourself that you can make good decisions. Because that's what happens when we have our trust, right? Um, Fall apart, when we are betrayed, when we are hurt, we take it upon ourselves. It's how could I have been so wrong, right? And it's not about being wrong, right? Maybe that relationship did fall apart. Maybe somebody did fall out of love with you. But that's because of change, right? These aspects of ourselves that naturally happen when we get into relationships. It's just like when you first start dating somebody, right? And they come to pick you up, and they got chocolates and flowers, maybe not this day and age, right? It's a little bit different this day and age, right? Ask your permission from your parents if they can take you out on a date and stuff. Like everybody had to run through my dad, right? Not like it always worked. My sister was notorious for climbing out the bedroom window at nighttime to meet all the boys that she was dating, right? But it was different in a time where we didn't have those options for divorce. When I was growing up, I never knew anybody who was divorced or had gotten a divorce. I did have a couple of friends whose fathers who had passed away, right? And I could have just as easily have been one of those children or teenagers because my father was very ill himself. He had congenital heart failure, right? But those relationships that we get in and we invest so much into, we naturally change in that. And just as an example, in my own marriage, right, that they come and they meet you with flowers and chocolates and taking you out for dinner and dress up days and slow dances on the dance floor. And then, right, you get married or you move in together, and the next thing you know, you notice the things that are different than the way you live, right? The big gobs of spit out toothpaste in the sink, the piles of dirty laundry and underwear and socks all over the bedroom floor, a husband that can't even remember garbage day 4 or to get outside and mow the grass. We look at our partners and we are prioritizing aspects of what we would like in the moment, right? Not looking at the future, right? We're not looking at the future. We're looking at cute bums and big, right? And we're not looking at whether or not our partner is going to be a good provider, a good father, right? To look at truly, right? We think that their hearts are good, but lots of times it's a matter of getting you hooked on them. And once you're hooked on them, once you love that person to death and you invest your heart, you invest your trust and your love, and then to have all of that squashed in a second. And sometimes it's not in a second. Most times it's not in a second. It's in those little things that we're noticing. And in the end, we're going, oh my goodness, what did we marry? Right? What did we marry? And in the 60s and 70s, you would be stuck in that, right? You made your bed, you sleep in it. And this day and age, right? Your husband looks at a woman walking down the street and that's it. You want a divorce, right? He wants to go golfing with his friends instead of taking you to a movie or out to dinner. That's it. You want a divorce, right? And the opposite way around too. And those are just little examples. There's like worse examples and many examples out there, but we're not investing, and we've made it so easy for people to say, "See you on the beach," right? And that's devastating for somebody who's got all their faith, all their trust, all their dreams wrapped up in their partners. Now, don't even take into consideration the children that come into that relationship, because they're the ones who really struggle in that. Because when we talk about examples, we are the examples for our children, right? And I never had children myself, but I have been a spectator and a participant in the family makeup. And I've been a mediator, right? In having those conversations and being that person that people could come to and talk about their problems, right? And be that ear for someone and be able, in my own trust and faith in myself, to come up with good ideas and good solutions. And sometimes, those solutions were, this person isn't treating you well, right? That maybe it is time to say goodbye. But because I come from that old school where, right, that relationships were meant to be forever, right? And even the bad ones, even the ones that shouldn't have been forever, right? It's like that idea when I say this story all the time that I'm not a true believer in that turn the other cheek. And that saying, turn the other cheek, comes from the Sermon of the Mount. But the priests and the pastors in the church used them in the late 1800s and early 1900s to talk wives into staying with their husbands who were abusing them or their children. And that was right, that was the start of women about having enough, right? Because they were specifically told, like, just turn the other cheek, right? Think of the kids. And lots of times, my parents would always get into these wicked, wicked fights, and they'd go, "Oh my goodness, when those kids are 18, I'm just here for the kids. When those kids turn 18, we are done," right? That wasn't that wasn't the case, right? Because after a while you become comfortable in the miserableness, right? And so those there's no win-win in that in any way, because either you're going to get your heart broke, right? You're going to be betrayed, the trust is going to be crushed, or you're going to endure, right? The uncomfortable, the pain, sometimes the abuse. And we've got to do a little bit better in that, right? And I think, coming from a dynamic family and growing up in a dynamic family and being quite a bit of a spectator in other people's relationships and a participant in what was entrusted in me, that I got to be a pretty good judge that, we need desperately that partnership for the children, right? The little boys, they need to be able to be taught by their fathers. They need to be good, growing men and know how to treat women. And the same thing with the women, to be able to be taught by their mothers all those aspects that would help them to be good wives to their husbands, right? And keep in mind we do have those relationships that are same sex too. So I want to include those too. It's just about building those relationships that are supportive, but supported for a lifetime, for the sake of the generations, right? Going forward. It's really tough because there is so much trauma going on. The kids are growing up so messed up, so confused, so brokenhearted, and now they're just expecting to be betrayed. So now they're not even trying, they're not even getting into the relationships. And like I said, the first time their boyfriends or girlfriends look at somebody else walking down the sidewalk, that's it, I want a divorce, and it's over just like that, right? And some of the times those battles are even worse, the uncomfortable of the marriage, because you're fighting for alimony, you're fighting for the kids, right? For property, and these things go on. And you can turn a relationship that at the very least was amicable. Is that the word I'm looking for? That, right? You just want something different. And the next thing you know, you've turned a relationship that's not going well into something that is pure war of the roses kind of thing, right? And yeah, I really today, especially, out on my walk and stuff, because I woke up this morning and, sometimes it happens. I get a thought and I go, oh, this will be a great topic of discussion for tonight. and I'll sit down and just the serendipities and the coincidence and the breadcrumbs and the content that comes across my path and the insights and my contemplation, I go, oh my goodness, and I become like furious in my notes, right? And I'm not even touching on to the subject that I wanted to talk about tonight, right? I just come in and I flow with it. And of course, there's a little bit of hesitancy in that because they're heavy topics. And the topic I wanted to talk tonight was making right your wrongs. But I came in and started talking about relationships and partners and betrayal and heartbreak and right? It's a strange thing when I come in here and I just flow and I don't even make it to the topic that I want to talk about. But if we're talking about, right, making right your wrongs, we can apply it to those relationships. We can apply it to the future of the children that are going to be born with or without fathers, right? I would say, or with or without mothers, but we all know usually the mothers get custody of the children unless they've done something very terrible, if they're are right having really bad issues going on for the most part, right? The wives do get the children, but that doesn't mean that those children don't need their father, right? They do need their father. And sometimes in that spitefulness and fighting over the kids and fighting over the property and fighting over the money, that there is that revenge where the wife will say, okay, I'm going off to California. And they were living in North Carolina on the other side of the continent. And if it's not always possible that the father can maintain a relationship with the kids. And if that father has not had a good relationship where they learned those skills also, right? Because those skills are passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. And now the mother's doing everything, putting a roof over the kid's head, putting milk on their cereal, tucking them into bed, working 8 hours a day, trying to find husband number two. So they're trying to have a social life at the same time, right? But again, those negative feelings, that lack of trust and faith and that sense of betrayal that comes into our lives that harden us up, it makes it tough to move on into new relationships. So lots of women are doing it all by themselves, raising their kids, right? Until those kids are out of the house. And sometimes the husbands don't even get a chance to have a say at all. Sometimes they're not even in the picture because they're on wife number two or wife number three by then. Or maybe they're totally disillusioned themselves, right? Right? I'm just speaking for myself for the most part, but men for sure are heartbroken and betrayed. And, again, they felt that they were walking into their happily ever after, but maybe the wife doesn't do right her share in the household. Maybe she likes to sit on the couch all day and watch soap operas, right? And not be able to be that partner that that husband was expecting or wanting to have. Okay, let me come into the comments. I can see Tammy's yapping away. Uh, yes, you are very right. You are very right at what you're saying. As a Christian, we have to believe in some things that we cannot see, but in faith and through faith, we believe. Now, if you can correct me in that, what is the difference between believe and faith, Tammy? Because you've separated them there, right? Through faith, you can get to believe. Now, what is the difference between the two? Because for myself, faith and belief are the same thing, right? That's okay, Cindy. No worries. You can talk whatever you want to talk about whenever you want to. For myself, I am open to hearing anything, and I am for sure not even judgmental, right? I don't know. I've been thinking about this word judgmental too, because we are all turning such a blind eye to what's not going right in this world, right? That more people should be able to have their say, to have a voice out there, right? One thing about faith is a substance of what we don't see. And belief comes along with the evidence, and then faith is something when it's compounded, it becomes the evidence for belief. Yeah, it's curious. I think it's something that I might delve into a little bit. I love using Gemini. I love asking these questions, right? To well, to grow a little bit, to make a little bit of movement, to have a better understanding, because there are lots of things that I don't get, that I don't understand, right? But making your rights, making right your wrongs. And that was going to be my topic of discussion today, right? And, when I look at the different notes that I put here, I really went off on a rant about that, right? Because we have gotten so much wrong, right? We have been We've been getting wrong since the beginning of time. Don't get me wrong. We got a lot of things going on right now that we are getting right. But I think as we get more resources and more tools like AI learning and right Gemini and GPT to be able to utilize these gifts and tools out there to advance ourselves and our understanding, that we should be using them, right? We should be using them because we could do so much better, right? We should be doing so much better. And it is my belief that these gifts were given to us so that we could do a little bit of course correcting, right? That we can make some headway and clear the path a little bit in where we're getting wrong, what we're getting wrong, and what's true for us, where we can get to the point of, right, our faith has been crushed, right? We've been betrayed, we've been hurt, we've become tough and cold and don't want to invest in our emotions because it's scary, right? Because it could happen again. If it happened once, it could happen again. But it's that idea that we each one of us get to make that choice. These tools are here for absolutely everybody. Everybody has a phone, right? Anybody can ask a question and have it answered. And, not everybody is doing that. Lots of people are disillusioned, right? They're looking out for the almighty dollar. They're looking for the cute bums. They're playing video games and watching Survivor and Big Brother on television, right? That we are preoccupying ourselves with things that are just entertaining us, right? And not helping us to be better human beings, right? Just because Cindy is working at creating the best human being I possibly could be, right? That's my choice. Those are my decisions. And I don't even have kids to pass these ideas on. All I have is my platform to come in and at very least open up that discussion. And, you know, it's a discussion sometimes that are just with ourselves, right? That we can jog a memory and a thought or an insight, and we can stir that around in our minds just by catching it through somebody's conversation or somebody's experience, but we're not even having experiences anymore, right? Because we are just being flushed with nonsense, right? Things just to keep us busy in the moment so we don't have to think about these things that mess us up, right? That mess our families up and right, give us an opportunity to right our wrongs. I'm not going to get into it now. I'm going to clean it up, rethink it, do a little bit of Googling, and maybe I'll come back to that tomorrow because we just kind of flowed into something different tonight, right? I believe your ways too, and thinking is 100% right. You know, they always talk about killing the ego, right? Too. But I truly believe that it's in that partnership with ourselves, right? That those other parts of us are working, are supposed to be working with us and experiencing with us because we just have not evolved yet. And so they think that as humans, we're just idiots, that we are, right, good for nothing, that we're not trustworthy, that we're going to betray ourselves and betray others, and we're doing a bad job in things. But that's our evolution. That's the human's prerogative. But you kill that ego, you kill the best part of, I believe, God's creation, right? God created us in the image of Himself. And I believe that. And I'm not even a Christian, but I believe in that saying. But that image has not evolved yet. We haven't gotten there. And yet we're not even getting the opportunity to work towards that because, right, we're killing egos. We're letting others make those decisions for us. We're being utilized as tools and as servants, slaves, quite often, to help get the job done. And we're not enjoying our lives. We don't even feel like we have the right to create the best human being that we possibly could be, right? Because the human being doesn't mean much, right? Because, well, we've been taught. That's the way we've been taught. But in what I do, I delve in and I recognize for myself that that is a serious mistake. That's a serious mistake. And if that's a serious mistake, then rightfully so, we should be righting our wrongs, right? Not just in how we treat others, but how we treat ourselves. And I wrote something down here. How we let others treat us is how we treat ourselves, right? So it's important to be kind to ourselves. It's important, right, that we evolve at the pace that is accessible to us. And we're not all doing that, right? We're sitting on the couch with the remote control. we're entertaining ourselves, we're killing egos, right? And so we just become brainiacs, right? Or we become nothing, right? We just become people who stare off to space and wait for the end, not trusting that we can have beautiful relationships with ourselves. And if we have made mistakes, because we're only human, right, in making mistakes in our relationships, that we can right our wrongs, we can course correct, we can make a different decision, we can pivot, we can turn our lives upside down. Maybe tomorrow Cindy will become a Christian, right? I could say no, that will never happen, but I have to be willing to be course corrected. I have to be willing, at the very least, to have an ear and to take in a truth and not worry so much that, you know what? Okay, those pastors and those priests, they betrayed those wives and told those wives who were getting abused by their husbands to stay in that household, to do it for the kids. But there was a better way. There has to have been a better way, right? And that is by having the information of what a good relationship really consists of. What is truly important to us? Is it those cute bums? Or is it somebody who's going to be a good father and a good provider? Is it a mother who's going to take care of the children, or the opposite way around? There are house husbands too, and the wives go off to work. But it has to be in that agreement, and it has to be in that understanding and in those conversations that we should be having before we say, I do. I do. Right? And but understand, we are only human. We make bad decisions, right? We are not always good examples to each other. We don't always make right our wrongs. We don't always search out the answers. We don't always take advantage of the tools out there. And we're not always creating the best human being we possibly could be, right? Some of us are, right? Some of us are trying, but we don't think we're doing a good job. But that's the idea. We're not even there yet. We haven't even evolved to that stage. So if you're just trying, that's something, right? That's something. And we have these amazing tools out in the world. We are able, as a small man, to have a voice and connect with people on the other side of the world anytime we want to, anytime that we want to. And maybe that person on the other side of the world has that answer to that question that you didn't even know to ask, right? But they share an insight and you go, whoa, I never thought of it that way. And then you got a little something to munch on for the next few days. And that can change you in a moment, right? That could change you in a moment and send you off in a different direction with a different political idea, with a different cultural insight that will say, okay, maybe I will let my daughter choose her own husband. Maybe falling in love is okay, right? That we are going to loosen up those ropes that we keep everybody tied to, because that's the way our grandfather passed it on to our father and how our father passed it on to us. But I could be the person who breaks that chain and give my children a little bit more rope because they're using the tools out there, right? It's that idea of get your homework done and you can watch an hour of TV before you go to bed, right? Do your chores. And on Saturday, I will give you $1 allowance so you can go to the grocery store and get a comic book. Maybe it's $2. I know when I was a kid, my dad would give us 50 cents every Saturday. And 50 cents would get us a bottle of pop, either a bag of chips or a chocolate bar, right? Because it was a coin flop because we liked both. And we'd get a comic book for 50 cents, right? That's when comic books were 12 cents. I remember 12 cents because they always had 12 cents right on the front of the comic books. That was in the 60s and 70s. Now, for 50 cents, you're not going to even get a chocolate bar for that, right? But that's times change. Oh my goodness, I wanted to say, you guys, we're almost at $8 a gallon here in Canada for the price of gas. It went to $1.84 a liter. I was walking home from my walk today and I looked at the gas sign, $1.84 for gas. I don't think I've ever seen it higher than $1.79, and I've made a big fuss of it. Usually it gets into the $1.70s sometimes in the summertime, right? But $1.84, and I think there are 4 liters. Is that correct? 4 liters to a gallon. So we're almost at $8 a gallon. I don't know what the price of gas is in the States right now. Tammy, if you drive, let me know in the comments how much gas is right now in the States. But that's just crazy out there, right? But these are the things that we have to deal with, right? These are decisions that we didn't have a say in. But in the end, majority ruled, right? We vote these people in. And if we vote these people in, we have to go along. We have to support in that, right? I grew up in a household that majority ruled. Of course, it was rigged, right? My dad would have the last vote if it was something that he really wanted to steer the direction in, whether it was where we were going for Sunday drive or where we were going to go for dinner, right? What television show we were going to watch, right? There was no majority rule on hockey night in Canada because he set the rule there. And the thing is, we got to sit and just spend time with him if we chose to. Usually it was just me on hockey. Nobody else liked hockey, right? They go off, the rest of the family go off and do their own thing. I would sit with my dad, right? And in between commercials, we'd have little conversations, right? But those were our choices and those relationships. I had my father right till he passed away. I was 23 years old when my father passed away, right? How many children this day and age right now in 2026 can say at 23 years old that they got to have their father at home their entire lives? Not very many. And that's disheartening, right? That's very disheartening because family is everything. Well, that's not too bad. $5 a gallon. Because I know you guys go by the gallon here. Here in Canada, we go by the liter. So it was $1.84 liter. The highest I've ever seen it is maybe $1.71 or $1.79 is the highest I've ever seen gas. And that usually happens in the peak of summertime. Yeah. Um, Faith and believe. I'm going to do a little Googling on that, Tammy, and on that topic of faith and belief, and I'll let you know tomorrow night about that. Yeah, oh, of course. But you got to think though, the value of a dollar, right? The exchange rate. Cuz I know the dollar is only like it's like 75 cents compared to the American dollar. So we're going to have to tag an extra 50 cents, tag an extra $2 to that. But yeah, the I forgot about that, right? There's quite a bit of a difference in the cost when it comes to what's going on in the states, right? You're right too, though. I want to be course corrected, Tammy. Right? You know your stuff too, right? And I love how you contribute to the conversations as we move along. But yeah, making right your wrongs. I'm going to look at it, delve into it a little bit deeper tomorrow. I'm looking at my notes here, and a lot of these notes can be can be tagged on to different types of conversations, different topics, right? You know, making right your wrongs. I had boundaries set in place, right? And I guess it can be relevant to the conversation about making right your wrongs, because if we had boundaries, there would be less wrongs, right? Directed at us for sure. Or at the very least, be allowed, right? Yeah. But things are changing, and more people are coming to realize the mistakes that we made, and we made those mistakes, right? 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Things things changed a lot in those decades, right? And things are going to continue to change, but that is evolution, right? And we have to be allowed to evolve. We have to be allowed to evolve. And yes, in the moment we could say we're stupid humans. But you know what? Go back 100 years, we were stupid humans. 1,000 years ago, we were stupid humans. Right? Going back to the Neolithic, we were stupid humans. But we are getting better and better and better. But it's because those answers, right? We are thinking about these things now. We're talking about these things now. And in majority rules, right? Right? We could make some better decisions where we could better get along with ourselves, right? In our own pursuit of what is true for us, right? And not necessarily just take the truth of what our parents and grandparents and great grandparents and our teachers and our politicians and the advertising on social media, and just take it at face value of that is how it is, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's always going to be. No, right? We all get to have a say, right? The small man has the opportunity to have a voice, right? To put in that vote. And you never know, somebody from the other side of the world is saying, oh my goodness, I'd like to choose the person that I'm going to marry instead of letting my parents do that. Now, I know like a lot of that is tied into religion and stuff like that. So I don't want to give any ideas and start arguments and wars, because these are ideas that have been passed down for probably centuries, if not thousands of years. So, I don't want to put my vote in there, but I believe in free choice, right? Because each one of us knows what's what we want, right? What we want, what we're looking for, right? And of course, we're still looking at cute bumps, right? And we have to take into consideration your parents know you very well, and they know, right? And they have an opportunity in discussions and conversations, right? To persuade you to marry somebody that might be good for you, might represent well in the family, might hold their own when it comes to raising good children, right? But these are things that we can talk about. These are things that we can think about, right? And, in that process, we can right some wrongs. At the very least, we can right those wrongs within ourselves, right? Understanding that everybody else gets to have a say, maybe the whole say in what they think, right? How they feel, and what they're going to do with what they think and they what they think and what they feel, right? And get to make those decisions and what they want to do about that, each one of us. And I recognize that, so I'm not going to push it any further than that, right? Not in this moment, right? It's in that courage and in that bravery that we get to open up more, right? Get to voice our beliefs, right? Get to delve in and hold firm in our faiths, right? But that was what the conversation had in store for me tonight. So I'm just going to fly with that, right? I always do when I come in here. I had a topic in mind, and I know better that when I make point lists and I take notes and that'll be a good conversation tonight. And then I go off onto other things. But when I hit that live button, it is what it is. Okay, you guys, let's grab a card. We'll go into it for a few minutes. Maybe it'll be pertinent to the conversation. Maybe it won't. Let me have a sip of my juice. Mm, yummy. It's tropical juice. Pineapple, and I think coconut. Tastes really good. Okay, here we go. If you've never hung out with me before, sending good cheer. I thought way far away that I heard a siren for a minute. Oh, I might have missed it. I'll come into my live and watch it again because I was all over the place tonight. And yeah, I'll let you know if I heard the fire truck. Oh my goodness, they were moving fast today. When I was out on my walk, I'd never seen a fire truck moving so fast as I did today. Two of them, one after another, going. I'm assuming going to the same place, but they were motoring down that busy road, and they had their hand on the horn because nobody was pulling over for them, and they were driving in the wrong lanes and stuff just to keep moving, and they did not stop. I always worry about. I was standing in the intersection, right? If somebody went through a green light because they're not hearing very well, and they got that music blasting and they're not paying attention, and right, and that would be an absolute mess. I don't hear about accidents with fire trucks in intersections, but I'm going to assume that they do happen on occasion. Um, you flew, you flew great, Cindy, with flying colors. I don't know about that, right? I don't know about that, but I appreciate that you said that, Tammy. I appreciate that. I second that. It's in that idea that I try, right? And I have to be honest in saying that in this topic of making right your wrongs, there was a little bit of fury in all those notes that I was taking today because I got into it. I could feel my system getting all worked up and I was getting all fiery and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring it tonight. So in all honesty, I have to say, right, because they said sometimes it takes that courage and that bravery as a small person to bring their voice to the surface, to bring your thoughts and emotions to the surface, right? And I'm just going to trust that when it's time to come to the surface, it's going to come to the surface, right? I've got a little bit of in me. Hey, on occasion I do. Okay, you guys, let's get into the word. 54 powerful words. Like I said, might be pertinent to the conversation. Maybe it won't. I love your channel, Cindy, and I love you too. Aw, who you are, how you are. Aw, thank you. And just keep in mind, Cindy's coming to the table, right? Cindy is doing the best that she can in that imperfect human that she is. But as much as I'm here, those other parts of me are here, right? And if those other parts of me, it's in that combination of the two that sometimes something else surfaces at the same time, right? So as much as I'm working, something else is working at the same time. I appreciate that you say that. Thank you, Tammy. Okay, here we go. Card for tonight. Powerful word for tonight. Oh my goodness. It is pertinent to the conversation that we had tonight. It works out like that quite often. The word we got tonight is learning. Learning is the process that prepares us for the future. Isn't that crazy that we got this card? I've never pulled this card, I don't think. While I've been working with these cards now, I think for 2 years I've been working with these cards, and it's an amazing, right? But like I said, lots of us are just sitting on the couch with the remote control. Just as an analogy, it could be something else. It could be staring off into space. It could be playing video games. It could be scrolling on your phone, right? It could be entertaining yourself with soap operas, right? But if you can delve in and just take an interest, if you could just Google a question like this word faith and believe, right? That I'm going to Google, I'm going to do a little bit of research on it in the differences of faith and belief and see what the comparisons are and what the similarities are in them, right? And I'll share that tomorrow when I come in. But that's in our choices, right? Learning is the process that prepares us for the future, and it's about learning to be better human beings, right? None of this would be possible without the human being. None of it would be possible without the human being. What are you going to do if we become extinct, right? What's the next smartest animal on this planet that can take our place? Is it going to be the gray whale, the humpback whale, the octopus, right? Maybe it'll be a primate. Maybe it'll be the gorilla that's going to evolve because we're gone, because that could easily happen. That's what evolution is just doing a little bit better by ourselves every single day. And we all need to evolve. We all need to be stewards of this world, stewards of ourselves, stewards of our children and our great grandchildren and those great, 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 great children, grandchildren that we're never ever going to meet, right? But we've all got to do our part, right? Oh, let's not forget Mother Nature, right? Be steward. Well, I guess you add that into the steward of the world that we live in, right? But learning is the process that prepares us for the future. And I want to be a part of that future, right? And I don't have any children, but I got nieces and nephews, and right? It's their future. That's our bloodline. Never deny your own because, in the end, that's all you've got, right? We're just going to keep coming back from one lifetime to the next. And I would like to think that we're going to make a little bit of movement in each life that we contribute, right? Okay, you guys. That's my good cheer. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Thank you, Tammy.